we go. So please welcome Bjoern Linder, VP of Engineering at New Work Shing. Big applause.
Welcome, buenas. Oh, I can't see anything here. Today I would like to talk a little bit about how we, as New Work, in the last 12 months have used domain-driven design to managing and designing our engineering organization. And there's a big purpose behind why I said first class. You might have an idea what first class might be about. It's not about saying DDD is more important than other methods like Agile, Lean, DevOps. It's not really about having a strict implementation in the organization or how to derive the process. So my personal understanding is the following. Can we see it? Yes. It says being domain-driven means to take the customer-facing world and the requirements into your domain model. And from this point of view, you're designing all of the rest of your engineering organization. This means organizational design, software architecture, system architecture. And I would like to highlight here two aspects of it. The first one is design, domain-driven design. It's an art of it, designing. I think we sometimes really take design into our very local components and making API design, components design in my bounded context. But I think if you would like to make the most use of domain-driven design, then you as well need to apply design to the higher order tactical and strategical components so that you're having the team topologies and the system architecture in accordance to it. And I think design in the last years, under all agile development and incremental re-architecture, has still a high value and, from my personal view, has not enough space today. And the second is domain-driven means being driven by the domain. So whatever in your complex system is changing, taking any local decision, this is transcending to the system, you should ask your domain and saying, is it according to the domain? Is the okay domain fine with it? And I will show some examples how we're doing it amongst the last 12 months. So here in a short overview, what I refer to, DDD can be practiced on operational, tactical, strategical level. You're seeing a lot of practices, and I can see maybe good here. Who's doing DDD on operational level, event sourcing? Who's doing it on tactical level, working with bounded context, and even strategic level? I see some hands. Not so much. Okay. The core thing is we in software development have learned over the last years we every 3 to 5 years need to renew all our technical environment, not only technology, but practices. And we are very good at picking up operationally some DDD practices. And then we're trying and pushing, and then we find that we're not aligned and in match and in the understanding with the other elements of your system. And when I talk to the DDD Euro community, they're referring mostly to operational DDD as implementation details. So the key point here is if you would really making most of the use of DDD, then a mixture of all three levels gives you the biggest return. And the key, very fundamental is whatever you have sorted out properly or not properly will transcend from the strategic point of view down to the lower levels. And here's really the recommendation. If you're taking any DDD implementation, to make it holistically, taking some practices from all three levels, and rather helping the teams and the ecosystem to set it straight from the beginning, from the left, and then helping the teams to do it right on the lower levels. Otherwise, they will bottom up fighting sometimes the system. Why I'm considering DDD powerful? So everybody knows Conway's law. There's a nice effects between your organization, your architecture, whatever side, and just in a more simple diagram, we're having on the one side the development organization, on the side software architecture, and there's a very nice cause and effects loop in our social technical complex system. Whatever you're doing to the left, if we would add a fourth team on the left, probably, and having two departments, you would see an effect then as well on the other side. Whenever you're taking out of the software architecture a microservice out, probably any team will respond to it and saying, I will be responsible for it. And this is not only between those elements, but in the all-over system, everything you're deciding locally here will have an effect on the other side. And the key question is here now how to get better control of those cause and effects loops. And here I like really much the domain-driven design approach, and I think you can make leverage of it if you're putting between the user journey with all of the requirements work, all of the feature requests, backlogs, what you're getting in, and on the other side, our very agile development, something in between, like the domain model, because the domain in itself has a characteristic of saying your domain normally is very stable. I'm working in recruiting and this stays normally. And even the subdomains underneath normally have the tendency to the inside having high cohesion and to the outside low coupling. And this is really where you can take leverage and saying this is a very good way to stabilizing your system by setting higher order macro structures. And if you're having the subdomains, then you can start working with the technical elements and putting bounded context inside of the subdomains. Sometimes you're spanning, sometimes you're having multiple bounded contexts inside of a subdomain, sometimes it's identical. And then you have the chance really to taking those elements down the line into your team topology or your software architecture. And to say here, if you really do this on technical strategic level, this is not an engineering game only. This is then a complete game where you're having a partner in crime with product and business where you need to be in sync. And I will show you now two cases where we worked in the last 12 months on it to give you a little bit practical examples. So just as a context, I'm working in B2B recruiting, roughly 20 teams, so this is my domain and my size of the development organization. Why have we started? And yes, every organization has all of the nice patterns. Whatever you do, you derail over time, and we had as well. Growing into a massive microservice architecture, you fighting dependencies, starting in a scaling case, oh, we need more platform products, but we don't know how the platform is structured. And then you find really good use cases and good triggers to working with DDD in those cases. We're working in several of those domains with DDD in between. And the first is a marketplace, a massive marketplace we're having on our platform. It's two-sided, a demand and supply on the marketplace, several years development, several teams working into. And we get new strategic focus, and we are not sure if we have the full knowledge, the full control, and the full structure to allow for the new strategy. And here, what we did as a first step is event storming. On the left, you're seeing some content, some events, which were mainly derived from the customer-facing department, so all sales and customer success and product worked more from the outside in, saying what is really our event flow we knowing, and we're then tried to finding the bigger flow steps and the subdomains, the business capabilities from the outside in. And the counter example is that we, with engineering, then took out of source code, re-engineered all of the actors, messages, entities, to regaining full knowledge. And with this knowledge, we were then try to find high cohesion patterns between the entities, and we're grouping this together, and you're seeing some circles which are then very good candidates for either bounded context or subdomains. And you see as well here, there's a lot of technical depth and a lot of things to do. And I just zoomed in, and what you see here in one of the areas is really the Conway effect. We're having two units working over one marketplace, and everyone is creating his own world. Duplication, some Kafka screams in between, and you're having some fun. And the end state, what we currently at, is that we identified all of the subdomains of this marketplace. This is all of the boxes. We putting ownership on every one of them, and then we're dragging to a to-be target state all of the entities and content we had to the boxes. And what you're seeing here in between is, between then the units, you're having really highly coupled dependencies. And here the fun begins. Here you're having now the content to work on bounded context. As context mapping, you can set your relationships, and then you need to really putting what probably has grown several years in this direction. You need to clean up over a longer period of time. Here you can derive your epics. Here you can derive your tickets. And then you need to work into that direction until you have, again, a very clear relationship between the units, the subdomains, and being clear. But this meta structure is really helping to getting to a target state, and that the marketplace itself is able to a linear scale. A second example is slicing an elephant. We're having one very big, successful monolithic application. Again, growth pain. Everybody has it. You change one here, you have one effect here, unstable in front of customer. Same exercise, identifying all actors, entity, relationships, find the groupings. And then these are very good candidates then for the other way around, and saying we would like to externalize, we would like to trim down the monolith and externalizing very microservices. And those examples to finding a cluster which is called candidate profile, then you can make a candidate service out of it. You can then really model out how is the relationship, what is the kind of service you would like to provide here, and find a transition strategy out of the application. And here, I think always the discussion how big a microservice needs to be is you find this naturally by high cohesion, whereas the entity model very dense, and these are good candidates. So where are we and where do we want to go? So we have a high commitment to going really from the user down to all of the system. Starting, we're having a very clear user journey model implemented. We as well having a very drawn and checked off by every party, product, business, tech, where we identifying our domain, our subdomains, our bounded context, and what we're seeing here is a nearly 80% state, which we're having modeled. And in relationship as well, we would like then taking the domain model into the next level, the team topology, for example, where we as well applying the structures. And the aim is that this is a long-standing artifact, which when every change in the system needs to be adapted in the other systems as well. And I would like to drill down a bit here into one of the boxes. It's very good working with a bounded context because you can relate then, for example, here the company page to the core team attract one. There's a clear ownership and a clear relationship to then as well a microservice called company page, where we are then again having entities and relationships. And if you take it even one more down, if you're just showing the one team, one of our principles we try to derive is one development team should have one context. And the context means sometimes one bounded context. Maybe it's too small for one team, then you can have two, but it should be in the same area, in the same sub-domain. So the cognitive load of the team, sometimes if you're taking the monolith example, if the team needs to span over all aspects of the application, then the teams have really suffer from high cognitive load, a lot of context switching. And our ambition is that we're finding the bounded context and then really having for every team a clear cognitive load. And if you just trim it one more down, I think from those elements you can derive a lot of stuff teams helping out. You could identifying from the team topology, this is a core team. And a core team means it's not a supporting team, not a platform team, not an enabling team, not a complicated sub-team. It's there to push on the user-facing user journey, has a clear mission, a clear KPI, and we're seeing as well that the team would know exactly their responsibility area, where they're accountable. The DevOps, you build it, you run it, you own it, would be given as well. All of the dependencies to other microservices, for example, is clearly described. I think if you can model this out and even combine it with lean mechanics, then you're having a very, very good foundation for happy teams and performing teams. So these were two examples from our last 12 months. We have a very high commitment to this is here to stay. This is just to be extended on our whole company. And the question is, how can you start? How can you get your feet wet? And the recommendation I as well got from the community is you don't need to have a very high learning curve in the beginning. It's enough to take some desire, to ingest some desire into the organization. So some people need to believe in, state that they want to have DDD. You need a small ecosystem where you say, this is the place where we're starting. Having maybe some early movers who are being promoting it, and then you can start, my recommendation, into just one. We have shown 5 of the problems we had. Just pick one, try to apply and to learn on the way. It's okay to then having some formal trainings on some of the practices, like event storming or context mapping. This is good for having some educated people. And then some follow through and some lead over DD implementation is very helpful to come to the end. And in the last, you can, of course, then roll it out to the full domain model. You can even combine it with other methods like Wortley maps or team topologies. It's really complementary. And it seems to be an industry standard emerging from those packages or this combined practice sets. There's very much material out there which you can just take and start with. It's totally cool. Whatever you would like to do, context mapping, there is material you can just take and apply. And where I would like to end, like I said, to manage a complex system, it's seldomly very good to do this with specific rules or tasks or processes. The better case is to applying mindsets, cultures, principles, and just what I showed to derive 3 from it. I think the first would be my own principle, what I'm applying at New Work. Make it holistically and make it really a team game with product and business. Secondly, whenever you're doing some local decisions, and this is sometimes team changes or software architecture changes, ask your domain first. Is it really in accordance to your domain model, which is the first mover, the first-class citizen? And the third one would be one team, one context. And if you get this right in total, I think then it's not only that the teams have a very happy ecosystem, they're performing very good. And I think then as well the teams perceiving DDD as a helping hand, not a kind of obstructed practice set, but a really a helping hand. And it should feel rather having tailwind and not fighting the system. If you're doing it wrong and bottom up, then it's probably rather perceived sailing upstream against the wind. Thank you.